There comes a moment, after all the silence and unanswered questions, when you finally ask yourself, was it me or was it him? You replay the story in your mind, wondering how something that felt so real could end like it didn't matter. But deep down you know the truth. You were real. Your love, your effort, your vulnerability, that was all genuine. He was just passing through, temporary. And as hard as it is to accept, sometimes life removes what's not meant for you in order to make room for what is. That's where karma steps in, not as punishment, but as clarity. And today, we're not here to talk about revenge. We're here to talk about the strength it takes to love fully, to lose, and to rise better, not bitter. You showed up with your heart open. That matters more than you realize. In a world where so many people guard themselves, play games, and operate out of fear, you chose to be real. You loved without holding back. You gave effort, attention, and consistency. And while it might feel like that left you vulnerable, the truth is it revealed your strength. It takes far more courage to love with your whole heart than to half show up. And that's exactly what you did. He, on the other hand, was conditional. He came around when it suited him. When things were fun, easy, or effortless, he was there. But when it required emotional presence, maturity, or even just consistency, he pulled away. And that contrast between the way you showed up and the way he did isn't about who's more lovable. It's about who's more ready. He wasn't ready to meet love with love. He wasn't willing to offer the depth you were offering. And instead of blaming yourself for that, you need to see it for what it is. A difference in emotional capacity, not a flaw in your worth. It's so tempting, especially in the aftermath of heartbreak, to internalize someone else's inconsistency as a reflection of your inadequacy. But the way someone treats you is often more about them than it is about you. People can only meet you at the level they've met themselves. He may have been attracted to your light, your stability, your openness, but attraction alone isn't enough. He didn't have the maturity or the emotional tools to hold that kind of love. So he withdrew, he faded, he disappointed. Not because your love was too much, but because it required more than he was willing to give. What hurts the most is when you know your feelings were real, when your intentions were pure and yet the other person couldn't or wouldn't rise to meet you there. It can feel unfair, like love is some kind of cruel trick. But this is where perspective matters. You weren't foolish for loving deeply. You were brave. And just because someone couldn't receive what you gave doesn't mean you gave the wrong thing. It just means you gave it to the wrong person. That's what karma often looks like, not revenge, not someone crashing and burning. Karma is clarity. Karma is life showing you exactly what you needed to see, that your love deserves someone who values it, matches it, and reciprocates it, not someone who disappears when the emotional weather changes. And maybe someday he'll look back and realize that what he walked away from wasn't just a good thing, it was rare. But by then you'll be somewhere else emotionally, no longer interested in proving your worth to someone who couldn't see it the first time. Your love wasn't wasted. It just served its purpose. It revealed who you are and who he wasn't. You were real. And that's your power. Real doesn't always win in the moment, but it always wins in the long run. Temporary people fall away, not because they didn't matter, but because they couldn't last in the presence of something genuine. You gave love, he gave conditions, and that difference will always speak for itself. Karma is often misunderstood. People think it's about revenge, about watching someone who hurt you suffer in return. But real karma isn't about punishment, it's about truth. It's not some dramatic moment where everything crashes down on someone's head. It's a slow, quiet unraveling. It's a revelation. It's life showing up with receipts, not to destroy someone, but to hold up a mirror. And the truth that mirror reflects is unavoidable. When someone walks away from something real, when they treat love like it's disposable, when they mishandle someone who showed up with honesty and heart, life doesn't let that go unnoticed. It may not happen tomorrow or next week, but eventually they're going to feel the weight of what they discarded. Not because you wished it upon them, but because we all experience the consequences of how we treat people. That's what karma really is. It's the natural return of energy. The beauty of this kind of karma is that you don't have to seek it. You don't have to wait around hoping they get what they deserve. You don't need to plot or pray for justice. You already did your part. You were real, you gave what you had, and you walked away with your integrity. The rest, that's not yours to carry. What happens next for him is between him and life. And what usually happens is this: he meets someone who treats him with the same indifference or confusion that he once gave you. And in that moment, something clicks. He suddenly understands what it felt like to love without being loved back in the same way. That's not cruelty. That's reflection. That's experience doing what it does best, teaching the lesson he refused to learn when he had the chance. And there's something deeply healing about trusting that, about knowing that the universe doesn't forget. It might feel like he got away with something, like he played a game and left you holding the pain while he moved on, smiling. But no one escapes their choices, and no one who turns their back on something genuine walks away unmarked. Even if they seem fine on the outside, life has a way of bringing them back to the very emotion they tried to avoid. Karma isn't about watching him fail, it's about watching yourself grow beyond the point where he can reach you. It's about becoming so whole, so self-respecting, so grounded in your worth that his absence no longer stings. It just makes sense. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing him to see what he lost, because deep down, you start to understand that he will. Not because you need him to suffer, but because truth eventually finds all of us. And when it does, it's rarely loud. It's usually a quiet moment, maybe when he's sitting across from someone who can't hold a real conversation, or when he finds himself missing something and doesn't even know why. That's the karma, that ache, that whisper that tells him you had something real and you didn't know how to keep it. But by then, you're no longer waiting for that moment. You've moved on, built a life, and grown into someone who no longer needs closure from people who couldn't value you. That's the real win, not his regret, not his lesson, your peace, your clarity. Karma isn't revenge, it's you not needing any. Some people aren't meant to stay. That's one of the hardest truths to accept when you love with your whole heart. You meet someone, you connect, it feels electric, and you start to imagine a future. You think maybe this is it, but not everyone who enters your life is supposed to go the distance. Some people are temporary by design. And that doesn't mean the experience was pointless. It means they were there to teach you something you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Temporary people often carry some of the most powerful lessons. They come in and shake things up. They reflect something back to you, your patterns, your wounds, your blind spots, or even your strength. And in doing so, they force growth. Maybe he made you realize how much you were willing to give, or how little you were actually receiving. Maybe he mirrored an old version of yourself or reminded you of how far you've come. Whatever the lesson was, he brought it to the surface. That's why he mattered, not because he stayed, but because of what you learnt in his absence. It's easy to feel like it was all a waste, like you gave time, energy, and love to someone who didn't deserve it. But nothing is wasted when you grow from it. Sometimes the role someone plays in your life is not to build a future with you, but to redirect your path, to wake you up, to challenge you, to show you what you don't want so you get closer to what you do. His presence, however brief, pointed something out, and that clarity has value. And let's be honest, if he had stayed, if things had dragged on, you might still be in a situation that doesn't serve you. So his temporary nature wasn't just painful, it was protective. The end of that connection created space for healing, space for reflection, space for someone more aligned to eventually come in. You just don't always see that in the moment, especially when emotions are raw and you're questioning everything. But hindsight brings peace. You look back and realize you weren't foolish for loving him. You were just honest about what you wanted. And if he couldn't meet you there, it doesn't mean you were wrong to hope. It means he wasn't equipped to stay. You were ready for something deeper. He wasn't. That contrast didn't break you. It revealed you. In that way, his temporary role served a permanent purpose. It drew a line in your emotional history. Before him, maybe you tolerated less. After him, you started asking for more. You became more aware of your own value, more protective of your energy, more selective about who gets access to your heart. And that shift will shape every future connection you build. So while it hurts that he didn't last, it doesn't make his presence meaningless. You don't have to erase him or pretend it never mattered. It did. It just mattered differently than you thought it would. He wasn't your forever, but he was part of your becoming, and that matters too. You'll carry the lesson, not the weight. You'll remember the clarity, not the confusion. And eventually, when someone real comes along, someone who stays, who shows up the way you do, you'll look back at that temporary connection and realize it was preparing you all along. It was never about holding on. It was about helping you let go. When someone leaves your life, especially someone you love deeply, it can feel like everything's collapsing. The loss is sharp, personal, and often confusing. You question yourself, your worth, your judgment, your role in the story. You replay every conversation, every red flag you missed, every moment you gave a little too much. But here's the truth. You don't lose when someone walks away. You gain something much more valuable. Even if it takes time to see it, you gain clarity. Clarity is what rises out of the ashes of confusion. It's what shows up when the noise fades and you're left sitting with the reality of what actually happened, not the version you tried to believe in. You stop fantasizing about the potential of who they could have been, and you start seeing who they truly were. The charm that once blinded you doesn't hold the same weight anymore. You begin to understand that their absence was a louder message than anything they could have said. They couldn't meet you where you were, and instead of pretending they could, life removed them so you could finally stop shrinking to fit into their inconsistency. When you're in it, when you're hoping, loving, and investing, you're often too close to see the cracks. You make excuses, you minimize your needs, you tell yourself, maybe this is just what love is supposed to feel like, but real love doesn't feel like confusion. It doesn't leave you questioning your value or wondering if you're too much. That fog lifts when they leave. It's painful, yes, but it's also freeing because now you get to see clearly. You get to understand what you are actually settling for. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. There's a kind of peace that comes after heartbreak when you stop needing them to come back and start being grateful they left. Not because you didn't care, but because you finally understand that their presence was costing you too much. Your energy, your joy, your sense of self. Losing them wasn't really a loss. It was the end of a cycle that wasn't meant to continue. You weren't just losing a person, you were gaining yourself back. People talk about karma like it's some grand revenge, a way to make sure they get what's coming. But karma doesn't need to be loud or obvious. Sometimes karma is just you growing, healing, and no longer desiring what once broke you. Karma is you thriving while they keep repeating the same cycles with different people. It's not about wishing them harm. It's about knowing that your evolution is the justice, that your peace is the proof. You get to walk away from this with the truth, that you showed up, that you were honest, that you tried. You don't need to feel ashamed of that. In fact, that's what makes you powerful, because while they were temporary, you were consistent. While they played games, you stayed sincere. And while they left, you learned. You took what hurt and turned it into wisdom. That's how you win. Eventually the hurt fades, but the clarity stays. It becomes your new standard. And the next time you feel that same kind of emotional instability or inconsistency, you won't tolerate it. Not because you're bitter, but because you know better. And that knowing is everything. You didn't lose them. You found you. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. And just because a chapter feels intense, meaningful, even unforgettable, doesn't mean it was supposed to last forever. He may have looked like the one. He may have sounded like someone who fit into your story long term. But time revealed the truth. He was just passing through. And that's not something to mourn forever. It's something to learn from. You were the one who brought depth to the connection. You brought consistency, care, and real emotional investment. Without you, it wouldn't have even felt like a story. You made him look good because you filled the space with your warmth. You made the conversations meaningful. You planned, you showed up, you gave. And that's what made it feel significant. You. That's why the loss feels heavier for you, because you weren't just reacting, you were building. He may have been charming or fun or magnetic in the beginning, but those qualities are often surface level. When it came down to the things that matter, emotional presence, communication, effort, he didn't follow through. He played a role, but he didn't have the substance to carry it forward. And while it's easy to dwell on why he didn't try harder, or why he couldn't be the person you saw glimpses of, the real question is this: why would you want someone in the lead role of your life story who only knew how to perform? Your mistake wasn't loving him. Your mistake was thinking he was supposed to be permanent. You wanted to believe that the connection meant something bigger. And in a way it did. It taught you what matters to you, what you won't compromise on, and what love should feel like. But he was a lesson, not a lifelong partner. You gave him a larger role in your heart than he earned with his actions. That's the thing about emotional investment. It's easy to confuse potential with promise. You see what someone could be, and your heart fills in the blanks. But long-term connection isn't about glimpses of greatness. It's about consistency. It's about someone showing up again and again, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. He didn't do that. And you can't write a future with someone who keeps disappearing in the present. What hurts is that you were real in a moment that was fleeting. You brought your full self to someone who didn't have the depth to hold it. But instead of regretting that, be proud of it. You were authentic in a temporary space. That takes courage. It means you're capable of showing up with love and vulnerability, even when there's no guarantee. That's strength, not weakness. You might still wonder if he'll realize what he lost, if he'll ever look back and regret the way he handled you. Maybe he will, maybe he already does. But that's not your closure to wait on. The real closure comes when you accept that he didn't belong in the whole story. He was a moment, a message, not the destination. When someone was never meant to stay, forcing the story to continue only causes pain. Letting go is what frees you to keep writing with someone who doesn't just want to read your pages, but write them with you. You were the chapter that made him look good, but you're the author of this life. And the best chapters, they're still coming. There's a moment after heartbreak where everything goes quiet. The noise of the relationship, the highs, the arguments, the longing, the second-guessing, fades. And in that silence, something powerful begins to happen. You start to see the difference between bitterness and growth. You realize that healing isn't about getting back at someone, it's about getting back to yourself. And you stop needing to prove anything to them. Because you've started proving everything to yourself, that's when you know you're not bitter, you're better. Bitterness keeps you anchored in the past. It's driven by resentment, by needing them to feel what you felt, by clinging to the story of how you were wronged. But healing looks different. Healing doesn't need witnesses or justice. It doesn't need them to understand what they did or apologize for how they made you feel. Healing happens when you reclaim your peace without waiting for them to give it to you. It's when you no longer need closure from them because you found clarity within yourself. You loved genuine. You showed up in a way many people never do. You didn't play games. You didn't pretend to be less than what you were. And just because they didn't appreciate that doesn't mean you were too much. It means they weren't enough. Not enough to value it, not enough to hold it, not enough to match it. But that realization doesn't have to turn you hard. It can if you let it. You can choose to close yourself off, to stop trying, to assume everyone will hurt you like they did, but that doesn't make you strong. It makes you guarded. And guarding your heart from love, because one person mishandled it, is just letting their failure keep winning. Being better is deciding that you won't let that happen. Being better is walking away from the pain with softness intact, boundaries stronger, and standards higher. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to act like you didn't care. You can acknowledge the pain, grieve the loss, and still refuse to carry it forward like a shield. That's strength. That's what makes you better. You look back and see how far you've come. There were days you thought the pain would never end, days you checked your phone, hoping to see their name, nights where your worth felt tied to someone else's decision. And now, slowly but surely, you're standing differently, taller, clearer. You're no longer hoping they'll come back. You're hoping you never lower your standards again. People confuse bitterness with empowerment sometimes, but real empowerment doesn't need to prove itself. It's quiet. Steady. It says, I know who I am now. I know what I deserve. And when you reach that place, you don't need revenge, attention, or validation. You need peace. You crave alignment. You start choosing people who speak your language, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and you walk away quickly when they don't. What you went through hurt, no one's denying that, but you didn't let it harden you. You let it refine you. You didn't turn cold. You turned wise. And that wisdom is what protects you now. You're not bitter, because bitterness would mean you still want something from them. You don't. You want better. You are better. And that shift changes everything. They were a chapter. You're the whole story. And now you're writing it with intention, from a place of self-respect, not scarcity. From love for yourself, not fear of being alone. You may not have gotten what you wanted from them, but you got exactly what you needed from the experience, a deeper understanding of your own worth. So when you look back at the heartbreak, the confusion, the letting go, don't see it as a failure, see it as a turning point. You were real, he was temporary. And karma made that clear, not by punishing him, but by revealing you to yourself. You learned to stop chasing potential, to honor your own worth, and to stop shrinking for someone who couldn't see you. That pain didn't break you, it refined you. And now, you don't just know what you deserve, you embody it. The love you were willing to give someone else, it's time to give that to yourself. Because the real win isn't getting them back. The real win is never going back to less than what you deserve.